Good afternoon, Palm Beach. Be down here. Thanks so much. It's great to be down here. I know it's going to get increasingly more crowded as this year and the next year goes, but right down here. It's interesting when I think about and kind of what I'm also about next year's the 250th anniversary of the a lot of different stuff like that, and I'd like to do three of the and the rush as a cut out of Adam's rib, so it must have been the physician, the doctor. You needed a doctor to be able to do that. Well, Thomas Jefferson, who, as you know, designed Monticello, University of Virginia, said no. The world's oldest profession is the architect, because it was the architect that brought order out of all the chaos in the universe. To which Benjamin Franklin replied, no, that's not true. The world's oldest profession is the politician. Who do you think created that chaos in the first place? And I can tell you, and particularly being down here in Palm Beach, you know, when there are things that are done in other parts of this country that are not good by some of these politicians, we immediately see the effects of that. I mean, I think when de Blasio got elected in New York City, I think the real estate in Palm Beach went up 15% in like the next few weeks. And I can guarantee you, if they elect this guy mayor in November, you will see an impact here in Palm Beach County. But in all seriousness, what we've seen in this country over the past 6 years in particular is a really sharp experiment. They say states are laboratories of democracy. We have 50 different states, different state governments. Even with the growth of the federal government over the last 75, 80 years, the states are doing most of the things that you rely on your day-to-day activities. And so we've been able to see that. And of course, having been governed, different states approach that differently, and we've been able to see the results. And I think what we can say about Florida is, you know, the principles, the conservative values that we've led with have produced tangible and meaningful results. And that's true in and of itself, but it's even more true when you contrast that with the results of states like California. And ultimately, it goes back to something that Calvin Coolidge said after he left office, pretty much probably towards the end of his life, because he didn't live that much longer after he left office as president. He said, you know, it's a grave mistake to substitute the value of entertainment for the value of accomplishment when it comes to governance. Those two are not the same. So much of what goes on in the political realm is more entertainment quality. It's not necessarily geared to producing tangible results. But we've focused on, when I say I'm going to do something, look at Fiscal. We actually have probably about 4 million more residents than New York State does now. They have 19.5. We probably have about 23.5 million residents in the state of Florida. And yet, with millions of more people than they do, our budget is less. Would you rather go to the DMV there or here? Are our roads better here or there? We have the #1 ranked higher education public, K-12, all these other things. And so just the budget of New York City, 8 million people, big city for sure, 8 million people, that budget is bigger than the budget of the entire state of Florida with 23.5 million people. And the state, all the debt that the state has accumulated over its 180-year history, just since I've been governor, by the end of this fiscal year, we will have retired 50% of the state's total historical debt over 180 years. Now, part of that is we did an accelerated program. We'll go in, we'll buy the bonds at a discount, we'll retire them, we save a lot of money on interest, so it's been beneficial for taxpayers, but we now have the lowest per capita debt of any state in the United States of America, and that's a good thing. I think your share as a Florida resident for our state's debt's about $450. I think as a U.S. citizen, your share of that debt's about $120,000, so a little bit different in terms of what we're doing. So we've been able to reduce that. We also have a rainy day fund in Florida, and from the time I took office to now, we've more than tripled the state's rainy day fund, and we're actually maxed out. The Florida Constitution does not let us put in any more money into the rainy day fund, which I actually think is a good thing because you don't want to just be stockpiling. We have enough for cushion in case we have economic issues in this country, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. But that rainy day fund is maxed out, and then we have surplus revenue way over and above that we have there. The government of Florida is spending less in this current fiscal year than we spent in the previous fiscal year, and that fiscal year less than we did in the previous year to that. How many other places are actually reducing spending around this country? And so we're showing that it can be done. Now, some people say, well, yeah, but you got to do certain things. We've done really big things. We've done really big things that have had a lasting impact. I mean, just look at what we've done with Everglades restoration. That was something that had really kind of gotten on the skids when I became governor. You saw major problems in 2016 on the East Coast, 2018 on the West Coast of Florida. We pledged $2.5 billion my first year, first 4 years, $3.5 billion the next 4. We far exceeded that. We now have reservoirs east. We've done our part in the south of the lake. You have water flowing now to Florida Bay. You're not seeing discharges like you used to see because we can clean the water. So all this stuff has had a meaningful impact on the entire ecosystem and the backbone of the state of Florida. A lot of people said it couldn't be done, and we've been able to deliver massive numbers of projects, many of them ahead of schedule, and we've even gotten the Trump administration to delegate to us responsibility for some of the federal projects. The reality is this: there's a big difference between doing things on Florida time and doing things on Army Corps of Engineers time. Like, they're great folks. It's just a different mindset. It's a different bureaucracy. So we get things, we do it, and we bring it in for results. So now, because of that partnership, we're going to complete all the federal, the state will be done by then for sure, but we're going to do it 5 years ahead of where it was scheduled on January 20th, 2025. And so by the end of this decade, all of those projects will be complete. And that, quite frankly, was a pipe dream just 6 or 7 years ago. You look at what we've also done on infrastructure. So I've got a lot of places around this state that have congestion. You have obviously people moving. I don't ever ask anybody to move to Florida because, quite frankly, it's like it's a free country. There's minuses, to be honest. I mean, some of our residents are like, well, we have too many people coming. All this. So I'm agnostic about that. You don't see me going to these other states begging. Now, we do bring law enforcement in because, quite frankly, they get treated poorly in some of these other states. But by and large, we don't. But the reality is people have voted with their feet. Florida has been the #1 state for net migration over the past 5 or 6 years. Incidentally, we're also #1 if you look at the adjusted gross that's moved into Florida. Not only are we #1 in the country, we're #1 by a country mile over Texas, but we are also have had more adjusted gross income move into the state under my tenure as governor than has ever moved into another state in all of American history over a similar period of time, even adjusted for inflation. So that's a really big thing. But you have to meet needs of that. So we started a program called Moving Florida Forward. I took billions of dollars from our budget surplus. We had projects that were scheduled to take place 5 years, 10 years, 15 years before even groundbreaking. We're accelerating these now, and so we're going to end up delivering major projects 5 to 10 years ahead of schedule. How is that something? Do you ever see that in any other parts of the country? I mean, they end up taking, how long has it taken California to build a railroad, out there that's cost them $100 billion? So that is now already doing wonders to alleviate traffic in places like I-4 and whatever. We're doing a big project on 395 down in Miami-Dade. It's a little tougher there because it's all built out, and you can't just find. Some of these other places I can find room to do different things. But the reality is that's a huge investment on things that makes a meaningful impact for people. Education. We have not raised tuition for any of our state universities 1 cent since I've been governor. So it's $6,300 for a Florida resident to be able to go to now the top-ranked public university system in the country 10 years in a row by U.S. News and World Report. We've been able to do that in part because we've invested resources in there. We also have a Bright Futures program. Honestly, if you can get into UF and some of these schools now, you usually can get your tuition taken care of. But we've had a big focus on supporting that. People not necessarily going to college, apprenticeships. We've more than doubled those since I've been governor. And then K-12, we have the highest per pupil spending we've ever had. Not that that's a great barometer, because some of the places that spend the most money are horrific school systems around this country. But we have shown a willingness to put resources there, including, because people will say, pay teachers more. Well, the way Florida works, if you increase money, it goes to the school districts, and then they divvy it up how they see fit. So there's bureaucracies that get serviced. There's other things that get serviced. So we created with the legislature something called a categorical teacher pay appropriation. So we started with $500 million. This year we did $1.38 billion. And it can only be used to increase teacher salaries. And so the schools are tied, and they've got to do that. And so we've been able to take the average minimum salary. It was like $40,000 when I became governor, and now it's about $50,000 increase. So, and I think it's been good, but the reality is that's a big investment. That's a multi-billion-dollar investment. So, and not only have we been able to do big things there, we've done more than ever has been done in the history of the state of Florida. The thing about, we don't have an income tax, and we never will as long as I have anything to say about it, but it's harder to cut taxes when we use groceries, medicine, things like that. We've also made baby items permanently tax-free. So your diapers, wipes, strollers, all that stuff is no longer taxed in Florida. We didn't end up signing that into law till I think about 4 or 5 years into my tenure, just as my youngest was getting out of diapers. My wife asked me, why didn't you do this your first year? We would have saved a lot of money, but you get there. So we do that. So we've done, and we also were the only state that had taxed commercial rent. We eliminated the business rent tax in the state of Florida. Many places are abolishing taxes like we are. So billions and billions of dollars of tax relief, including eliminating taxes like the business rent tax, doing big things that benefit the state, and yet paying down debt and running surpluses and even decreasing your budget year over year for the last 3 years. So don't tell me this can't be done. It can be done, and we've shown that it can be done. We also had to deal with certain challenges, and when COVID-19 happened, you saw, I think, a hysteria take hold in the media, amongst some of our professional classes that, as you looked at the data, was just not consistent with what the data was showing. And so the decisions we were having to make early in that were not popular at the time. Certainly, I got a lot of flack from media, political opponents, even people in my own party. And we were going against the machine. But, I looked at it and I was like, you gotta have a right to work and put food on the table for their family. People have a right to operate business. Kids have a right to be in school and learn in person like it was supposed to be. So we went and we charted that course. And, you had some local governments, Palm Beach, Miami, some of those, that were very restrictive. and I had to come over the top rope at some point and just say, no, we can't do this anymore. We have got to make sure everybody, this applies statewide. We're not going to be, I'm not going to let you fine people if they don't have a mask on. I'm not going to let this, I'm not going to let that. And we got a lot of flack for that. It's interesting, though, now everyone claims they were for what I was for all along. They weren't at the time. But, so I was kind of on an island. I didn't have a lot of air cover, certainly no air cover in the media or anything like that. But I knew that this was the right path, and I wanted people to be able to make their own decisions. And so I had people just tell me, well, just mandate masks, just do something just so people don't. No, I'm not going to do that. A lot of people said you're going to have really tough time politically unless you do that. And I did not know whether that was true or not, but I also knew my job as a leader was to care more about protecting the jobs of the people I was elected to serve than I was about protecting my own. And if it didn't work out for me politically, so be it. Now, that was a time to lead. And I can tell you, looking back, if you look at Florida's success, the trajectory, it would not have happened had we allowed this state to descend into a Faucian dystopia. It would not have happened had we not empowered people and protected their rights when it really, really mattered. And so if you look at now, CNBC. CNBC ranks Florida #1 economy of all 50 states 3 years in a row. Became governor, the idea that we would ever be ranked ahead of Texas or some of these other places was kind of considered a pipe dream. And now we've really let it. That would not have happened had we not separated ourselves during COVID. Obviously, you saw a lot of activity in this county and throughout southern Florida in particular. But, that's just about doing the right thing when it matters, even when it's not easy. And that's one of the things that I think that it kind of gets lost in the whole political sphere is if it was easy to lead on these things, everyone would do it, right? Leadership is lost. And when you get out there and lead, people are going to swing at you, people are going to attack you, and you got to shoulder on and do what you think is right. And it's interesting, as much as everyone was saying during COVID and other times during things we've done that have been impactful, the polls are bad or that. I can tell you this, since I've been governor, the number of polls I've taken about issues and about what I'm going to do on an issue is, I know exact number of polls, 0. Because first of all, what is a poll going to tell me? I can phrase it one way and get one result. I can phrase it another way and get a different result. But it's also a static analysis. If I have the vision and I believe in what I'm doing is right, and I do it and I execute and deliver results, even if people weren't for it at the time, then they end up being supportive. That's what happened during a lot of these other things. So being willing to lead and take the flack, I think, is really important. And we've had other battles, too. We have universal school choice in the state of Florida. There were a lot of school unions that didn't like that. We also did paycheck protection for dues for school unions. They have, you got to give. A lot of the teachers didn't want to give. So now they can't take it automatically out of paycheck. So that has been a huge battle. Crime. You have this issue around the country where you have these prosecutors that get massive amounts of funding from people like Soros, and they get elected. The platform is to not enforce the laws and to actually let criminals back on the street. We've had people move to Florida, I can tell you because they've told me the stories, who left San Francisco, left LA, left these places. Prosecutors that got elected in Florida, they got in, one in Tampa, one in Orlando. They were not satisfying their oath of office. They were not faithfully enforcing. So I was the only governor in America that's actually removed derelict state attorneys from their posts. We removed both of them. And I'll tell you, there's times when you do things like education, school, you think you're helping people. I think you are, and what would happen if someone didn't have a scholarship, or what happened this? And it may be very bad. But on those issues, I can tell those decisions absolutely save lives because they were replaced by prosecutors who weren't going to use the justice system as a revolving door. and we're actually going to hold criminals accountable. And, people say, oh, your inmate population has increased, in Florida. Well, that's part of the reason why we have a 50-year low in the crime rate. There's folks that need to be held accountable. So we were able to do that, and we've worked very closely with local law enforcement. Our state agencies have worked very closely with them. We started this program, well, during COVID, we did $1,000 bonuses for all police and fire and EMT 3 years in a row. And then we did a recruitment bonus of $5,000 that new law enforcement officers from within the state, the younger people, and recruits from out of state. If you come from San Francisco to Palm Beach, let's say, Sheriff's Department, you get a $5,000 bonus right off the top. That is a signal that we've got your back. Yeah, the money's nice, $5,000 isn't what it used to be, and kind of before inflation it was a lot different, but it's helpful on the margin for folks, but that's not what really is the impact. The impact is, the state of Florida cares about what we do, that they're going to give a $5,000 bonus to start, and this is reverberated around the country. I remember I was on the West Coast a couple years ago, and I talked to a police chief in one of the nicer areas of Southern Cal, and I said, how you guys doing? He's like, I'm doing great. Police officers want to move to Florida now, and that used to not be the case. And so we've been able to do it. So we're a law and order state. We've not only talked the talk, we've walked the walk. It's not just statistics to say we have the 50-year low in the crime rate. That has an effect on people's lives. And of all the people that have moved to Florida, and they talk about different reasons, yeah, no income tax, yeah, during COVID, people were fleeing some of the madness, yeah, there's problems in education, some of these other states. All those are factor. Number one factor, by far, public safety. Feel safe in some of these. We've led and we've delivered on that. We're also working, I think, delivering big results on higher education. I mentioned we have number one ranking 10 years in a row by U.S. News and World Report, which is great. We have a lot more that needs to be done. And one of the problems that you've seen, and we saw it after the October 7th, 2023 Hamas attack against Israel, where these college campuses ended up becoming like law-free zones almost. Crazy rioting, targeting Jewish students and faculty, also Columbia University, some of these places letting inmates run the asylum. That doesn't fly in the state of Florida. And so you didn't see that happen. You didn't see that happen in our universities, and some people have told me, man, you're really lucky that didn't happen in Florida. And I tell them, luck don't have nothing to do with it. Any university president in this state of Florida knows that if they were to allow their campuses to descend into Columbia-style anarchy, they would find themselves no longer being presidents of the university in the state of Florida. It's just accountability. And look, we've been battling stuff with the culture of higher ed for a long time, but I think that really showed a lot of people that there's a lot of rot that's been allowed to develop over the years in these universities. And so one of the things we did that no other state did at the time, I think some are trying to emulate, we now in Florida, for our state universities, all tenured professors must undergo review every 5 years and can be terminated for poor performance. That is going to it's already making a really big difference in filtering out. The purpose of university is not ideological indoctrination. The purpose of a university is pursuing truth, upholding high standards of academic excellence, and ultimately preparing our students to be citizens of this republic. And so we're embracing that classical mission of university should be, and people are responding overwhelmingly as a result of that. We also have had to do, a lot of different stuff in terms of managing this, that, or the other thing, but just on a political point, because I think it's instructive. I'm talking about results, I'm talking about all this stuff, talking about leadership, what we've done, and the substance is really what matters, right? I mean, if we do something good and it improves your life, whether I get any credit or not for it is irrelevant, and I don't seek it. But what is the political verdict on all the stuff that we've done? Well, when I got elected governor in 2018, Florida was the #1 most competitive state politically in the United States and had been for 20 years, maybe more. Every major election, governor, presidential, in that decade, decided by 1 point less in 2018. We had 300,000 more registered Democrats than we did Republicans in November 2018 when I first got elected. And so I came in, we acted very boldly across these and other issues, delivered results. And so what happened politically on that? Well, 4 years, fast forward 4 years, November of 2022, Republicans didn't have a 300,000 registration deficit. We all of a sudden had a 300,000 registration surplus, 600,000 net shift in the registration. What did that yield in November of 22? It didn't yield a 1 point victory. Our re-election victory was the biggest Republican victory in the entire history of the state of Florida for a governor's race. 1.5 million vote margin, including being the first Republican to win this county in 40 years, by the way, which we were. Going into that election, everyone's like, oh, can Republicans be 2016 presidential election, Miami-Dade and Broward, and Palm Beach, I think they went 20, 30 points for Clinton over Donald Trump. And so but Miami seemed to be changing, so they're like, well, maybe Miami can be competitive. And we knew about a month out, yeah, we're going to win Miami-Dade. That's not a problem. We ended up winning that by double digits. So then the question is, can you do Palm Beach? And probably about 10 days before the election, we're like, yep, we've got Palm Beach. We did Osceola, and then Orange with Orlando. Can we get Orange? And we're just like, I don't know that we can do that. That's a little too liberal for us. We did good, but not good enough to win. So fast forward, we were 300,000 in the hole in 2018 for registration for Republicans. Now it's 1.3 million more registered Republicans than Democrats. I mean, that's a big change. That's people are validating what you're doing. And so not that the political thing is the most important, because you do the right thing for the right reasons and let the chips fall where they may, but the fact of the matter is, we have seen movement, not just from people moving here, but also from people shifting from one to the other. I think that you've been 3 times more likely to shift from D to R in the last 6 years in Florida than vice versa. It's interesting, when COVID was really, the COVID migration was really happening, I'd have some of my supporters down here were worried. You see all these New York license plates, and they're like, well, gee, the governor won by 35,000 votes. If we bring in 50,000 Dems from New York, then we may not win the next election. So they literally would go to Publix, they'd find New York license plates, and they'd put flyers in the windshield. Don't vote down here like they do up there. And there was a fear of this. And then when the California license plates, people were really scared. They didn't want to import Berkeley into Central Florida. It would have been tough politically. But here's the truth. You look at all 49 other states for the last years, and you look at who's moved to Florida. Every single one of those 49 states, more Republicans have moved to Florida than Democrats have moved to Florida. I don't think you could ever find that type of statistic in the history of modern American politics. And so it does show on a political level, the validation. So final point I'll make is this. I'm happy to take some questions. We have to deal with, issues. Hurricanes, for example. Knock on nothing brewing in the Atlantic right now that seems like it would do. Every day we get by, man, we are so much closer to the promised land. I'll tell you, if we get through with none, it would be very good for this state in a variety of reasons. You just deal with it. When we're ready, we work. Utility comes, we do all this, we get all this stuff done. We had bridges knocked out after Hurricane Ian. We rebuilt one in 3 days. We did the other in 2 weeks, the Sanibel Causeway. I think in some states those would have been out 6 months. I just think it's bureaucracy, it's red tape. We don't do it. So a lot of it is just getting things done. Taking a step back, we're also in kind of this broad sweep of, can we govern ourselves in this country or not? And I look at some of the things that have happened in Washington over recent years. I mean, we're $37 trillion plus in debt. You look at how gold and silver are really going up. That's a lack of confidence in how the government's spending money, how the Fed's managing all this stuff. You see it. And it goes back to really the founding of this country. well, first of all, when we celebrate 250, this is something that particularly our young people really need to appreciate, because our founding fathers, they were not just kind of on the fringes of society. These were all very eminent and successful people. And so when they went to Philadelphia in 1776, they pledged their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor. That was not just like popping off on social media would be today. If they did not succeed in winning independence, every single one of them would have been put to death. And so they understood. They also understood a third of the colonists wanted to stay with Britain. A third just didn't care, apathetic. They were apathetic even back then, and just like we have many now. And so they had about a third of the colonists that actually believed in what they were doing. And it was very principled. They were not actually being overtaxed as we would consider that today, but it was the principle. If someone could tax you even a little bit without having representation, you're giving up your freedom to give away that power to somebody that you don't have a say in holding accountable. And so they were willing to risk it all for a very important principle, and also just the idea about, where do your rights come from? They believed, as the Declaration said, endowed by God with certain unalienable rights, and then the people loan the power government to protect those rights. But those are pre-existing rights. Those are not rights that the king is granting to you, which is how most people conceived of politics back in those days. The Founding Fathers bucked that trend and did it. So they put it all on the line, and we should appreciate that. They also, it wasn't easy. Just winning the war was not easy. And actually creating a framework where you could have success. They win the war and things are really falling apart. They didn't have a federal government that could really do anything. Some of the states were, and so they meet in Philadelphia the next decade, 1787, to try to create a constitution. And they show up to Philadelphia, very eminent people, Washington, Franklin, Madison, Hamilton, a bunch of them. The sweep of history. They studied every republic in the history of mankind. And the one thing that they saw that all those previous republics had in common, and there was really only one, constant, and the constant was this: every single one of them had failed. And so they really believed that what they were doing was going to answer the question once and for all: can people really govern themselves? Can you have a society based on the idea that, yes, our rights are God-given, not government-granted? Yes, we live under rule of law, not the rule of individual men. Yes, government needs to be limited and confined to its proper sphere, or are we forever destined to live under various forms of despotism? And they believed that this country would ultimately answer that question. But they also didn't that Franklin said, he agreed to support the Constitution. He's like, I don't know that we can do any better. I got reservations, but I don't think we can do any better, so I'm for it. It wasn't that they thought that would end it. In fact, when Franklin walked out of that convention, he was asked, Dr. Franklin, did you give us a republic or a monarchy? And his answer was, a republic if you can keep it. They understood you could have the best Declaration of Independence in the world, the best Constitution in the world. These things don't run on autopilot. They require every generation of Americans to defend them, defend freedom. Sometimes that means even putting on a uniform, risking your life, and even giving the last full measure of devotion for service to this country. And so when we're doing what we're doing and we're dealing with all these important issues, we also got to be mindful of this is still an experiment. This is still an experiment about whether free people can actually govern themselves successfully. And I like to think now, I know it's the case that what we've been able to do in the last years and shows that yes, not only can you do the right thing, not only can you deliver results, but you can thrive like the states never thrived before. So thank you all. God bless you. I'm happy to take some questions. Stay right there.
Thank you, Governor DeSantis. A final reminder to our audience, if you have questions that you would like to ask the governor, please raise them in the air at this time so our volunteers bring them to the table. Governor, our first two questions always come from the students in the audience. If the first student from Wellington High School would please stand, introduce yourself, and ask your question.
Good morning. My name is Melody Prats. I'm from Wellington Community High School, and I'm the president of our speech and debate program, coached by our lovely teacher, Paul Gaba.
That's awesome. Good job.
Thank you. We're extremely happy to be attending today as well. Many states, as we know, have faced challenges in recruiting and retaining qualified teachers. How does Florida intend to stem this tide to provide young adults such as myself and my table with quality educators while also maintaining high expectations for student achievement?
Great. Are you a senior?
I am.
Do you know what you're going to do after the school year?
I'm hoping and majoring in entrepreneurship and international relations.
Do you know where you want to go?
My goal is to go to George Washington University in DC.
Okay, yeah, G-Dub. Okay, well, good luck to you. In our speech and debate, by the way, we had like 10 districts that had the became governor. Now every single school district in Florida has it. We're actually going to be rolling out, because we do a competition every year, we're going to do cash prizes for the first, second, third place, pretty big ones too, and really continue this and do stuff in conjunction with America 250. So I'm glad you're doing it. So, well, first of all, we've done a lot on teacher shortage. So be careful, anything with that, just so people know. If they're citing statistics from the teacher union, just understand those are political statistics. And so I remember a few years ago, all of a sudden they're talking about Florida having teacher shortage. Guys, I'm like, are we the only ones that are having this? They're like, no, 30 states have more. And I was like, well, why are they always focusing? Focusing on Florida, that's just what they do. So we've done a number of things. One, we've raised the average minimum salary, as I mentioned, about 20% from the time I've been, not that it's everything, and not that you're going to do it to get wealthy, because you're not going to get wealthy, but, we want it to at least be attractive for folks to start out. Two, we've increased apprenticeships in the classroom. You can be very smart. It doesn't mean you'll be a good teacher. There's certain intangible skills that go into it, and I think learning on the job is a great way to do it. So that has been able to get more people qualified to be jobs. We've also created alternative pathways, so our military veterans can get credit for their military service if they want to go into the classroom. And we've had a number of people who've been able to teach using temporary certification. Then they do that a couple years, they get the full certification, and then they're golden. But then also, we've actually done things to help teachers vis-a-vis undisciplined students. I'm sorry, the inmates cannot run the asylums in our classrooms, and you have a right to make sure your classroom is orderly, and students should be held accountable if they're not going to be attentive. And we also did to allow no cell phones in the classroom, and I think that's really good. And the net result of all that is Florida, we have less than one teacher vacancy per school. So that's definitely below the national average. I think a lot of what we've done has been partially responsible for helping us get in a better spot. But I also think this issue with technology is going to continue to be a big issue. I have not seen so when we did the no cell phones, I literally had one of these leftist columnists compare me to Hitler for doing that. And I'm just thinking to myself, like, why? Now everyone's doing it. Republican, Democrat governors, they're all doing it because the results are what they are. First of all, who would want to teach when everyone's just buried on their phones? Like, what's the purpose of that? Second of all, these students, like, it needs to be interactive. I believe in being there in person. The virtual education was not a great substitute for most kids to be able to do it. So keeping these cell phones and these smartphones out of the classroom and making them actually pay attention to what's going on, I don't think you're going to be able to be successful unless you adopt that policy. Then the question is going to be, this whole artificial intelligence. And there's a whole host of things, on this. But it's one thing to have technology that helps enhance the human experience. To have technology that some want to use to supplant the human experience is a different ball of wax. We as human beings can never relinquish our responsibility to think for ourselves. Cannot have school kids that just simply rely on ChatGPT instead of actually learning and retaining knowledge for themselves. So I think we did the right thing on the cell phones. I think as this artificial intelligence, although first of all, a lot of it is actually wrong when you do it, so you can't fully trust it. But I think it's going to constantly be an issue. How are we going to use technology? Do we want to supplement education, and do we want to supplement people doing things? One of the reasons I like speech and debate, you got to get on your feet, you got to express yourself. You can't just text your friend what it is. You get up there, you do, and you may have to argue a point that you don't even agree with. You know, there's some people that maybe they hate the Second Amendment. Well, maybe you're going to get a resolve that you have to defend that, and you got to get out of your comfort zone, and you got to do that. That's become a lost art in this society and in this country. And so I think the basics of education are what they are. I don't think that we can let technology overwhelm or even cancel out our responsibility to learn and think as individuals.
Thank you very much. If the second student from Palm Beach Central High School would please introduce yourself and ask your question.
Hi, my name is Chelsea Wise. I'm the senior class president at Palm Beach Central High School. I'm here on behalf of SGA and our sponsor, Mr. Cordero. My question for you today is, you recently proposed the idea of eliminating property taxes. Are there alternative revenue sources that would replace those resources in the items they fund?
Are you, what year are you?
I'm class of 2026, so I'm a senior.
Do you know what you're going to do afterwards?
I want to go into business administration because I want to be a real estate agent.
Are you going to stay in Florida? Do you know where you want to go?
I want to stay in Florida.
Okay, well, good luck to you. So, well, a couple things. One, it's been tough for a lot of people over these last 4 or 5 years keeping up with the costs that have gone up across the board. I mean, if you look now, affordability of homes adjusted inflation are the least affordable they've ever been. It's not just a supply issue, because like in Florida, there's been a lot of supply that's come online. People have built a lot of homes, and they've built homes in Texas and these other places. Maybe not as much in California or some of these places, but you've had that. You look at the cost of groceries. You look at the cost of all these medical and health insurance. I thought they were supposed to make that affordable years ago. It's not, right? And so what can we do to really help people? The one thing we control, I mean, I can try to do good policy that maybe would impact some of these things in the private sector, and I think we do it in a way that, you know, that is helpful on the margins on a lot of stuff, but the one thing we control is tax. And not the state, because we don't levy property tax. It's a local function. The revenue goes to local. It doesn't go to us. I don't need any revenue. I've got big surplus. You know, we're fine. But is it right that somebody that's been in their home just constantly has to pay tax every single year? When does it end? It's almost like you're renting your home from the government. And so what we've said is not that we would eliminate it on every property, but as your personal homesteaded property, you know, we want you to be able to own that free and clear of the government. Now, what people will say is, oh, you know, you need all this money. It's interesting because, you know, we're working with the legislature to actually put something on the ballot, so you guys will be able to vote, and we're working through all these things. The vast majority of property tax revenue is not from homestead Floridian properties. It's second homes, investment properties, commercial properties, Airbnb, all those other things. That's about 68 to 70% of property tax revenue statewide. I'll bet you in Palm Beach, probably get more on that stuff because you have so many people that have nice homes who are snowbirds, right? So you have an ability to be able to do really historic relief for people that would be there. So people say, well, where are you going to get the money? Well, how come nobody asks, why can't government spend less money? And here's the thing. And this is, so we created basically, so we're doing audits of state universities and state agencies too. But we created something called the Florida Agency for Fiscal Oversight, and we do these FAFO audits now. Blaise Angolia is our chief financial officer, and he does these county and city audits. $200 million in overspending in Orange County, $200 million in overspending in Jacksonville. The mayor spent $80,000 to create a hologram of herself at the airport. So you see all this stuff, and so it's like, okay, well, what is that? if you just went back, and then a county like Broward has had a 60% increase in their budget, and they've had no net population increase over the last 5 years. So if you just had 2020 levels of local government, you would be able to do that, no problem. But we're also going to be recognizing this. Not every county is Palm Beach, right? You guys have people, tourists, snowbirds. You can have relief for your residents and allow them to shoulder the burden for your local services. And we want law enforcement, fire, education, water, resources, and all that stuff, and we will have ample of that. Some places in Florida probably wouldn't be able, to fill, even if they reduce the budget, just because they don't have the economic base. I've calculated, if you take the 32 most fiscally constrained, we could backfill 100% on day one, and it wouldn't even need to be this much. 100% on day one, every single homestead property, take them off the rolls, and it'd be about $260 million a year. That's budget dust in Florida. So it can be done. We're working on exactly the best way to do it, but I don't think we can say that it's fine to just have more and more property tax revenue to the coffers, having the budgets go up and up. Florida's spending less this year than we did last year. We spent less last year than we did the year before. What's wrong with holding the line on spending and keeping all this constant? So you guys are going to have an opportunity to weigh in on that, but we in Florida, we don't need any revenue from any of this. We will be giving some of our revenue, to help local governments, particularly the fiscally constrained, but even some of the others. I mean, we've got the money to be able to do it, and we transition them into a situation where no one's going to get forced out of their home because they can't afford the property taxes. Young people are going to be able to buy a home and make the payments without being crushed by it's more expensive to pay insurance and tax than it is for the principal and interest on your mortgage in most parts of the country, not just Florida. What does that do for young people? It takes away the American dream. So we need relief, and we're going to give you guys an opportunity to get relief.
Thank you.
So, Governor, we have maybe the largest stack of questions we've ever had from our audience, so we're going to do as many as we can, as quickly as we can. So with last week's announcement by Publix that they're going to allow open carry, you've been an advocate for firearms. How do we protect the public at the same time as we allow a constitutional freedom?
So this is, so like I'm pro Second Amendment, all that stuff, like 100% philosophically, but like this is also not, there's nothing new under the sun here. Florida was one of 3 states that did not allow any open carry. You have very liberal states that have allowed it for decades. Vermont, for example, has had it since the 1770s. But even states like Midwest states that are more blue have had it. And so I don't think much is going to change. Why do I say that? Because you've traveled to these other states. You've traveled to these places. Do you notice anything very different? I think the reason why 2A advocates have really wanted to see this done is not because they're going to open carry, because like if you're protecting yourself, you don't want to open carry. You want it to be concealed. You don't want somebody to know that you have a firearm on you in most instances. But I think they think about it as, okay, if I'm concealed carry, and you do have the right in Florida to conceal carry even before this court decision. If I'm there and I'm in a restaurant, I take off my jacket, or if something is showing, all of a sudden I've committed, a felony offense. It just doesn't seem right to them, and I get that. So I don't think you're going to see very much difference, and I just say that because we are really one of the few states that have had those laws. And they say, oh, well, what about tourism? What about these other things? All these other states have tourism too. I mean, are you saying that they don't have anything like that? I mean, I just don't see how you're going to see much. So I think you're likely going to see pretty much status quo on this. There may be some permutations here or there, but we've got 38, 40, 44 states that have had this policy for a long time.
Thank you. A follow-on to the property taxes. How specifically will local governments fund local services should the property tax be rolled back or eliminated?
Well, like I said, I mean, you'll be able to tax snowbird properties, foreign owner properties, Airbnbs, investment properties, properties just like you are now. That's 70% of the revenue anyways. And then how the homestead exemption works its way through. We're working with the legislature on that. We got to get 2/3 of the legislature. It may be that phases in, over a period of time to be able to do it. So, and then we will also provide some support. We probably wouldn't do as much here as we would in some others, just because we got economic base and would probably have an ability to do. So, but those will be decisions for localities to be able to work themselves through. But we're going to produce a proposal that will be strong and will be doable.
Question. We're witnessing the dismantling of the U.S. Department of Education. What impact will that have on Florida education, if any at all?
So here's the thing on that. I think that the federal Department of Education, first of all, obviously, it hasn't worked, right? It was done in the late 70s. Does anyone think we've had a good run on K-12 education in this country since the late 70s? Of course not. We just haven't. And so they've done things, and they try to condition behavior on getting money and all this stuff. Like, for example, we were doing, what was it that Biden threatened us with? Maybe it was the school masks. We said kids can't be forced to wear it. If a parent wants to put it on them, that's up to them. But, that's your right as the parent. And I think they threatened to take away school lunch money from us to be able to do that. And I'm just thinking to myself, like, you do not want them to be, and we just said, you know what, we'll call your bluff, and they ended up not taking it away. But why would you want to be? So philosophically, I'm totally sympathetic, devolving states. The problem, I think, just functionally that we're seeing is Congress has never actually dismantled it, right? Congress has not passed a law on this. So there's certain things that are being done internally through the bureaucracy, but all those programs are still on the books. It's the same thing with FEMA. Give me more responsibility. I'm totally good with that. Obviously, we don't really use FEMA like these other states do. The preparation and the initial response, we handle that. I think we've used FEMA for some Coast Guard support, but we do not expect FEMA to run a hurricane response for us. But after a hurricane, there are certain federal programs, individual assistance for a homeowner. There are certain programs to reimburse local governments. And so, okay, well, how are you going to work through that? And so I think in both the education and in the FEMA, you need actual legislation that will devolve to the states. And what I've said is, if you just block grant me, figure out what a typical hurricane costs in terms of these federal programs. If you block granted me 80% of that, that money would go farther for people if we're doing it through Florida than if it's having to go through the federal bureaucracy, without question. But that hasn't been done in law, and I'd say the same thing is true with, they said they want to block grant money for K through 12. Well, I think you probably have to change the law to do that. And so philosophically, I'm agreeing with both of those, but I think functionally, Congress is going to have to step up and actually ratify, these executive actions.
Governor, I know you have another appointment that you need to get to, and we are grateful for your time. We have one final question for you. You served in the U.S. Navy. Thank you for your service. You were attached to a SEAL team. What lessons did you learn in your military career or during that SEAL team attachment that you've been able to implement in office as our governor?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. So, when you're in those types of situations, so I was in like Fallujah, Iraq, Ramadi, all that stuff, kind of at a time when it was initially very dicey and kind of the tide turned while we were out there. But, those are situations where you have your individual responsibility, but it's also part of a broader team effort. And, if one person fails, it's not just that you personally had a failure, it's that, people could die as a result of that. You're letting down other people. So I think what motivated everyone, regardless of where you were in the cog on that wheel, let down, the people that were there with you. And it was really thinking about those other folks. And so, part of how, I do with leadership is, I got to protect my people, right? If they're out there and they're doing the right thing, you've got my support. You go do it. As long as you're working hard, as long as you're doing it with honor and integrity, and you're getting the job done, I don't care if the media, I don't care what happens with any of that. You've got my support. And I would much rather them days and me take the criticism than vice versa. So I do think that that's part of just viewing things as a team that I've always carried with me as, from a naval officer and all the different things. But then it's interesting. I've been in certain areas where that wasn't as true. I'm a three-term U.S. congressman that has recovered fully from that experience. It's not exactly the same there. A little bit of problems with kind of how they see things. But I think on our administration, we do. And look, this is just a fact. We've had 6 major hurricanes in 7 years. Irma, I wasn't governor for. Michael happened right before I got elected governor, but we really had to do the medium and long-term recovery there. We had to do Hurricane Ian. We had to do Idalia. We had to do the 2 last year majors. And we also had a third, Debbie, no one talks about, which wasn't a major, but was there. If you look at the response that the state of Florida leads, and our locals do a great job working with us, Hurricane Milton, 4.2 million power restorations in 72 hours. You have FPL and Duke and all them, but you also have these rural co-ops have linemen ready to go, municipalities now. We've created a culture that we're going to get the job done. We're not asking to do this. We hope that we don't have to do it, but look, we're a peninsula sticking out in the middle of a very tropical part of the world. It's just something that we've got to prepare for. And when it happens, you do it, and we have a culture of quick response, no bureaucratic mumbo jumbo, and just get the job done. That's why we're able to get a bridge built in 3 days when people said it would take 6 months. That's why you've been able to get power restored in record time for any major hurricane. That's why all these things, can get done, because it really goes back to the culture and making sure that we're getting the job done, and no excuses, just make it happen. So you guys should be proud. You got some great people that work in the state of Florida in emergency management, local emergency, law enforcement, fire. I wouldn't trade our guys for anybody in these United States. So hopefully we don't have to test that out for the rest of this hurricane season. And if we can get through a few more weeks, knock on wood, we're prepared, but hopefully we can, then I think everybody will have a great winter and spring. And I know Palm Beach will continue to be the place to be. So thank you all. God bless you.